Okay, welcome everybody. We just have to give it a couple of seconds to let everybody enter the room. We have quite a large number of participants that we're expecting today, so that takes Zoom a little while to process. So please just bear with us and give us another sort of 30 seconds while we wait for everybody to join the room. Hi to everyone just joining us. We're just giving it a little bit of time for everybody to be able to enter the Zoom room. As I was just saying, we have quite a large number of attendees that are signed up for this event, which is fantastic, but it does mean that it takes Zoom a little while to process everything and let everyone in the room. So just give it another sort of 30 seconds and we will get started. I think the numbers seem to be kind of settling, so I guess we can get started. So welcome everybody to the book launch for Rosi Braidotti's fantastic book, Posthuman Feminism, which of course was published earlier this year by Polity Press. And if you don't have your copy, it's got a fantastic cover, and here it is. You can see the image in the background of Rosi's screen as well. But my name is Dr. Emily Jones, and I'm a senior lecturer in law at the University of Essex. But I'm not just kind of random. I work a lot, of course, on posthuman feminism myself. So I'm very, very happy to be here to discuss Professor Braidotti's fabulous book, Posthuman Feminism, which examines the implications of the posthuman turn for feminist theory and practice. And this book is both groundbreaking, but also really necessary, because most mainstream posthuman scholarship has actually neglected feminist theory. Yet feminism was one of the precursors, as Rosi really shows in this book, of the posthuman turn. So posthuman feminism therefore provides insight on these foundations and what they therefore mean for a politics of the posthuman in both the contemporary and moving forward. So you don't want to just hear from me. So to give you a bit of an outline of the format of the event, and I am of course your chair, we have three speakers with us. So unfortunately, Shella Sheikh, who was supposed to join us, is unwell today, which is unfortunate. But we do, of course, have our fantastic live panelists, Dr. Simone Bignell and Professor Matthew Fuller, who are joining us as well, and will be speaking. And we also have a pre-recorded message from Professor Stacey Alamo as well that we will be sharing with you. So each speaker is going to speak for around 10 minutes. And then after that, Rosi is going to respond to the discussion. And then we will have some time for Q&A. So we want to hear from our audience what you think, what sort of questions you have. So you can ask a question at any time during the session. There's a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It's got like 2 speech bubbles. So please use that to ask a question, and I will be asking them of Rosi at the end. You can ask your question anonymously. You have to click a little tab that says ask anonymously. So please do that if you don't want your name to be seen or read out. So that's enough in terms of administration. To introduce our speakers in the order that they will be speaking. So first up, we'll have Simone Bignell, who is a senior researcher in the Jumana Indigenous Nations and Collaborative Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney in Australia, where she works with First Peoples who are reclaiming their self-governing authority for self-determination. And she has multiple books, but they include, for example, Post-Colonial Agency, Critique and Constructivism, published in 2010, and Exit Colonialism, published in 2022. She also co-edited Deleuze and the Post-Colonial in 2010, Agamben and Colonialism in 2012, Deleuze and Pragmatism in 2014, and of course, with Rosi, Posthuman Ecologies, Complexity and Process After Deleuze in 2019. So Simone will be our first speaker. Second up, we will have a pre-recorded message from Stacey Alamo. So Stacey Alamo is Professor of English and core faculty member in Environmental Studies at the University of Oregon in the United States. Her publications include Undomesticated Ground, Recasting Nature as Feminist Space in 2000, Bodily Natures, Science, Environment and the Material Self in 2010, and Exposed, Environmental Politics and Pleasures in Posthuman Times, published in 2016. She also co-edited Material Feminisms in 2008 with S.J. Heckman and edited the volume Matter in 2016. And then our final speaker, before we hand the floor to Rosi, of course, will be Matthew Fuller, who is Professor of Cultural Studies at Goldsmiths University of London and the author of How to Be a Geek, Essays on the Culture of Software. as well as How to Sleep, the Art, Biology and Culture of Unconsciousness. With Andrew Goffey, he is the author of Evil Media, and with Olga Goranova of Bleak Joys, Aesthetics of Ecology and Impossibility, and with A.L. Weisman, Investigative Aesthetics, Conflicts and Commons in the Politics of Truth. And he, of course, also co-edited with Rosi the transversal post-humanity special issue of Theory, Culture and Society. And then, of course, I should introduce our fantastic author of the book, who doesn't really need so much of an introduction, but it would be very rude of me not to introduce her. So Rosi Braidotti is Distinguished University Professor Emerita at Utrecht University, and she has multiple honorary degrees from Helsinki, Linköping, Fellow of the Australian Academy of the Humanities. But of course, her main publications include Nomadic Subjects, Nomadic Theory, the Posthuman Knowledge, and of course the fantastic Posthuman Feminism that we are going to be discussing today. And just as a reminder, for those of you that are interested in this topic, Rosi, of course, teaches a brilliant summer school, which I've been very lucky to be a part of over the years as well, at Utrecht every single year on posthuman theory. This year it's going to be entirely online, so very accessible no matter where you are in the world, and there'll be a focus on methods, so do come to that if you are interested. So enough from me. Without further ado, I would like to hand the floor to our first speaker, Simone. So whenever you're ready, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Friends, colleagues, illustrious guests and fellow speakers, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you tonight. Distinguished Professor Rosi Braidotti, my congratulations to you and to Polity Press on the publication of this important new book, Posthuman Feminism. I feel very honoured to celebrate with you and help launch this field-defining contribution by one of our most significant thought leaders in the theoretical humanities. Thank you to Emily for the introductions. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Simone Bignell. I am Senior Researcher in the Centre for Indigenous Nations and Collaborative Futures, which is part of the Jumbunna Institute for Indigenous Education at the University of Technology in Sydney. I'm joining you, though, not from Sydney, but from the ancestral lands of the Kaurna people in southern Australia. Aboriginal sovereignty was never ceded in this place, and I'd like to pay my respects to Kaurna leaders, past, current and emerging, and acknowledge the ongoing struggle against settler colonialism. So as is the case for Indigenous peoples and their allies in resistance to colonialism and to colonisation, events of the past few weeks chime out the ringing truth of Braidotti's posthumanist mantra. That is, we are all in this together, but we are not all human in the same way, and some categories of human are definitely more mortal than others. As the horrific brutality of masculinist warmongering surges once more, these are indeed times in dire need of feminism. These are also times, I think, in desperate need of Braidotti's posthumanism. We live in an era when the big news of global plague or of severe weather systems affecting human cities in a state of climate crisis, when the overall malaise of the human condition muffles the ongoing quiet lapse into extinction of multiple varied non-human life forms at alarming rates. Indeed, we live in times when planetary life itself survives only for so long as war makers exercise restraint in their choice and use of weaponry with massive lethal capacities. The current hostilities, once again pitting humanity against itself, express an anti-Western sentiment that stems in part from the imperializing impulse of modern European humanism, which posited European man and his civilization as the zenith of human cultural achievement. He is a universal template of superior human being towards which all of humanity should aspire on the Western view, the humanist view. This original Western solipsism, born with the humanism of the Enlightenment period, underpinned the colonisation of Indigenous owned and occupied lands and continues today in just slightly more subtle but no less insidious forms, including, for example, cultural imperialism in the Academy of Ideas and in the information economy. In the light of the continuing globalizing imperialist worldview of the patriarchal West, it is perhaps unsurprising that the major powers of the East feel a kind of retaliation is justified when NATO's moralizing forces for neoliberal capitalist democracy sit poised upon their doorsteps. White feminism has always resisted the exclusive dominant masculinity of the Western humanist subject, but it has not always extended criticality to the cultural exclusivity and the heteronormative dominance of Western culture and philosophy. In fact, white feminism has at times been complicit with racist colonial humanism and has benefited from it. With this book, Braidotti attunes to the diverse lineages of intersectional critique submerged within global feminism. And so she gives us a fully post-human feminism, as well as a feminist post-humanism. In the acerbic words of the acclaimed Aboriginal Australian Geonpul philosopher Aileen Moulton Robinson, the critical strains to which Braidotti listens have for the longest time been talking up to the white woman through the writing of post-colonial, transnational, Black and Indigenous thinkers. The responsive task of white feminism is quite obviously not to keep talking down to these thinkers made other, but nor is it to enfold difference within the bosom of a more encompassing Western feminism that implicitly maintains its normative power to include or to exclude as it sees fit. Rather, white feminism must move right over, make room so that critical decolonial alliances can be forged transversely and on par with transnational Black and Indigenous feminisms. Working together then, but not all in the same way, post-human feminism is then better equipped to take on the intersectional injustices that define the convergence of powers in anthropos. In Braidotti's own sage words, she says to place different orders of knowledge and different traditions of subject formation in dialogue with each other does not mean creating false equivalences or overarching meta-theories. It rather aims at amplifying possible resonances between them. As a result of this post-human methodology of affirmative alliance, post-human feminism is a veritable cacophony of a book. It raises a joyful clamour of multiple and diverse feminist voices whose combined anger at the state of the world and commitment to the change that must happen prompt what Braidotti names as an empowering political praxis, activated by an affirmative ethics that embraces the positivity of difference. This is an untimely book for our times. It offers us a vision for becoming otherwise than what we are via collaborative lines of flight from what we have been. It is with great pleasure that I commend to you Professor Braidotti's Posthuman Feminism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simone, for those really important insights. So it is now over to me to share Stacey Elena's video, which hopefully I will do with success. Everybody gives me a second. Okay, hopefully you can all see that and we're good to go.
Okay, so I am honored and so pleased to be here to express my gratitude and appreciation to Rosi Braidotti for all of your incredible works, your body of work, really, the last several books, not just one, but a whole set of books that introduce and interconnect and frame and argue for and embody this abundance of post-human theory and arts. And your newest book, Posthuman Feminism, is especially important to me. I'm really amazed by how you've pulled together such a vast array of feminist texts, creating a long history of precursors to posthuman feminism. This is just really an incredibly detailed and comprehensive and generous sort of pulling together of all of these texts that can be thought of as having something valuable to say for posthuman feminism now, and that's a huge accomplishment. And I think it's particularly valuable in this rather wretched moment to both respect the different positionalities and to stress, as you do, that we in quotation marks are in this together, and to trace all of these possibilities for alliances and alliances that could be there, and just that continual practice of respecting differences, but then also pulling in communities, creating communities. I think that just couldn't be more important. And if you'll indulge me, there was one section that I just thought, I mean, there were so many parts of this book that I just loved. But on the topic of love, on Posthuman Feminism as Creation, you write, the creative imagination in the arts and literature is crucial for the task of forging alternative social imaginaries that support posthuman feminist visions. And this is exactly what Virginia Woolf did for Vita by turning her into Orlando, the trans historical figure who lives forever. Orlando is the trans lover that transits in between sexes and genders depending on who they fall in love with. This raises the haunting question that Elizabeth Young Bruhl asked, where do you fall when you fall in love? And I love this part. I think you fall into the space-time of the world, a sort of breathlessness of desire as higher degrees of intensity and a speeding up of relational possibilities. If falling in love is a fall at all, it is a fall into the elemental force of the world, out of the trite and predictable repetitions into productive accelerations. Desire is a heightening of sensorial perception and overflowing within specific geometries of relational forces. Posthuman eros is the stuff of the world. I love that so much. And in my own life, that a similar sort of thing has been really getting me through all of this as I garden with native plants and welcome into my garden all sorts of native birds and butterflies and insects, and this kind of elemental falling in love with the world has been really important to me. So that made me very happy. And I think, overall that it's just so crucial and so vital that you ask at the end, where is the transformative force of feminism today? And I think that that's a question that we need to keep posing. What is the transformative force of feminism? And through your own intellectual generosity and capaciousness, you practice this ethos of affirmation that you so eloquently propose. And the book is just truly, truly inspiring, and I thank you very much for it.
So thank you very much to Stacey for those insights as well. I think you're probably already being persuaded by Simone and Stacey so far that this is a book that, of course, you have to read. But to move on to our third speaker, Matthew, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Right, thank you, Emily. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much about echoing the things that have been described already so well by Simone and Stacey. And what I'd like to start out from in this response is a statement towards the end of posthuman feminism, and one that sets out in a certain way the mode of operation that the book proposes. Where Rosi says, posthuman feminism is a force for affirmative radicalism in an age of political exhaustion. It embraces the complexity of the current conjuncture, the better to resist, recode, and transform them. And in a nutshell, this is a manifestation for a form of synthetic writing that draws on what Rosi describes for us so well, this complexity of relations of power in the sense of stately mightiness on the one hand, potestas, and potentia, power of capacity, power as capacity on the other. And the book enacts a relational way of writing that holds a multitude of things in tensile relation, the better to grasp them while finding new formations in their conjuncture. It enacts breaks, cuts, convergences, and abounds in confluences. Here in posthuman feminism, power is the power to rework. And I want to explore this in a few ways in what follows. At a time excoriatingly marked by twin catastrophes, by domination and conquering in the mode of the state and the nation, that of war, and the violence of perpetual capitalist growth, slamming into the material limits of the planet, producing a pandemic and climate damage. This present war, we can say, can be diagnosed as a way of insisting that the principle of the ruler, not something at the scale of a mere virus, is capable of returning states to their geostrategic comfort zone, a return to the ordering of history written in the mode of great men and predestined civilizations framed in distinction to the devaluation of values. This war is an assertion that all the difficult and complex formations that go into making societies can be crushed under a single logic. Against this book, Posthuman Feminism, is an argument for the significance of such things, of the complex, the multifaceted and the provisional, of the difficult and the pleasurable, but also for another logic of power, for the capacity of the micro-political, that things can jump scales in ways that are unexpected, but also sometimes rigorously thought through, designed and imagined. To affirm with posthuman feminism that power is the power to rework is to take a difficult situation and reformulate it to the point where it is overturned, certainly a guiding operative principle in feminism. And it's also an ecological principle in the mode of Michel Serres' parasite, that each consolidation of an organism, a habitat, an environment becomes a ground for a further reworking, for further relational interplay. I want to take a couple of detours to explain why this is an important factor in Rosi's book. One is an example from music. There are stakes in the kind of reworking that posthuman feminism talks about that is also described in Danveer Singh Bra's recent book, Tech Life, Ghettoville and Eski, the sonic ecologies of Black music in the early 21st century. What is recoded and reworked by music is the city, or in Danveer's take, the colony. A basic form of this is the dub track, reworking the track. The track is the space of reworking. And Danveer's rearticulation of Paul Gilroy's reading of dub in There Ain't No Black in the Union Jack identifies how it's predicated upon finding new potentialities in a recording. Here, chiming with Braidotti, abstraction is a visceral power of the bodily and rhythmic imagination put into play by technical practices. Against this, another kind of power to rework can be found as cultural appropriation, as a counterexample of a kind of reworking that invokes and works through potestas rather than potentia, something that involves acquiring by fair means or foul a set of cultural assets stripped of their generative force. That's why there's something both repulsive and fascinating about the large institutions of the art world, for instance. And then there's the case of platforms as a milieu of reworking. And by platforms, I mean large-scale global or regional monopolies, such as Facebook or VKontakte, YouTube or Bilibili. Platforms are frameworks for reworking that introduce their own grammar of action, inviting use in and replacing what it reworks, in training energies and capacities towards them. Here, both the potentia and potestas of reworking are worked with. So there is a reworking at the level of the modes of formation and of differentiation of kinds of power, where one is passed off as the other. In this condition, surveillance capitalism is only part of the story. It names a part in the loop, that of abstracting something, a social relation. But the key is also to rework it, entrain relations and the users who are composed by them to a shifting set of signals and rewards. In this condition, the humanities and the post-humanities, specializing in part in the interpretation of interpretation, are seen as something of a threat. They provide a back channel, an unwanted feedback loop, a thing that remembers and calls to account. They provide an undertow in history. That's why in my own institution, it's history, the Department of History, and the Department of the Comparative, as in literature, that are being deleted in a fit of administrative rabies at the moment. Memory and comparison are uncomfortable when what is required are more or less vacuous calls to creativity. Posthumanism and the posthumanities further open this condition of the interpretation of interpretation. The posthumanities proposes that the hidden currents of history are generated everywhere, especially in those places that are assumed to have no agency. In matter, amongst animals, in ecologies, in the merely technical, amongst those who are made women. Feminism, defined many times in this book, is reworked and tracks its mutations as a process of multiform liberation. I think it's worth reading almost the book for these definitions and reworkings and redefinitions of feminism as a form of this practice of reworking. So Rosi Braidotti's writing technique in the book, as has been mentioned already, is this immensely generative and generous act of reworking and recoding, a way of finding allies and finding resonances, opening up a more general condition of interconnection and uplift in what Simone has already called a cacophony of a book, and that Stacey names very well as a generosity. It's a writing of books as recognizing an intensifying networks of alliances. And this approach is firmly set against the Ponzi schemes and silos of academic citation and the thought of those who only think through the leavings of the masters. This reworking is not simply celebratory and collective, it's also a deeply methodological argument about the nature of posthuman knowledge, one that is a political and necessarily feminist approach produced by mapping tensions that engender conditions of reworking. That is, this reworking is not simply a caprice, but draws a fundamental part on the formation of new powers that posthuman feminism brings together. I felt sometimes reading it that this book itself was an immense library on the move, a population of books, overturning and page turning, one text rereading and calling out to another in a joyful and painful process of collective learning. These wild bookshelves are literally marching in the streets at times too. Indeed, the book maps the feminism integral to Black Lives Matter, to Me Too, to the Gilets Jaunes, and other movements, themselves composed of reworkings of power relations. And the streets, chapels and mosques, workshops, labs, homes, occupations, hacker spaces, and other familiar and unlikely gathering places of feminism are as much called out to as books, along with long aeons of subtle and defiant reworking that operate with what Adrienne Rich in the epigraph to chapter 2 calls a wild patience. Perhaps this is itself a term that marks something of the writing strategy for this momentous trilogy of books that posthumanism feminism caps, as over and over again, they open up power as the power to rework, to further reworking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for your insights. And without further ado, it is time to hear from the woman herself, the person that everybody has probably been also waiting to hear from. So Rosi, would you like to respond to those fantastic contributions from our speakers, please?
Well, I am deeply moved and totally overwhelmed. And I am reminded of the wisdom of the saying, beware of your desires because they may come true. And all my life I have wanted supportive, informed, critical readers. And now that I have them, I'm totally overwhelmed. I do not know how to thank you all, also all of you out there that keep on coming, for your interest, your support. Thank you, Polity, for believing in this trilogy that I never thought that I would manage to conclude and complete. Maybe a couple of things, given that they came across in the generous, overwhelming responses that I got from you all. Indeed, this is an effort at creating genealogies, at connecting across generations, at showing the immense diversity, variety, and also tenacity of feminist, queer, trans, LGBT thinking across multiple spaces. And I wanted to do this really very much to insist on the diversity, on the variety, on the long-lived genealogies of feminist ideas, because I'm a little bit concerned about a general impoverishment of the narratives that we make about feminist theory. There is a tendency to become sort of formulaic about one line, one genealogy, one narratives. And I wanted to diversify that and show, if you're taking the Posthuman as the prism, as the articulation of the times that we're living through, well, you can really walk your way back through multiple bookshelves of feminist works, all the way to early modernity, to Lovelace, to the very first women who tried to come to terms with technology when it was simply not possible for that particular gender to engage in it. I wanted to go back to the very early days of ecofeminism, which has to be the single most important source of a critical thinking about the environment within the European tradition. And immediately with that, and thank you so much, Simone and Shayla, get better, we miss you. The long legacy of colonialism and the complicity between philosophical thinking and empire building, and white men's burden to theorize and synthesize and frame everything within the Western project of modernity. And within that, to hear alternative voices, decolonial, postcolonial, indigenous, very important. This trilogy is the moment where my Australianness comes to the fore a lot more, and my belonging to that culture, my complicated, ambivalent relationship to that amazing culture becomes very affirmative in the dialogues, in the interaction with a massive body of work of indigenous thinking about what we would call the nature culture continuum. So I wanted to try to diversify and bring different tradition into an intergenerational dialogue, and methodologically it has been really difficult because it involved an enormous amount of reading, and I think you could almost use this book just for the scholarly apparatus. The bibliography is 60 pages. The index, I think, is Polity helps me, I think it's 30 something pages, and I worked on that index for weeks to make sure that all the connections were exactly as I wanted them. And of course it is all very partial, it's written from my own perspective, but take it as a methodological encouragement to acknowledge your elders, to acknowledge the long traditions that constitute the feminist project. Do not impoverish or reduce these incredible traditions that we are made of. Keep them open, keep them flowing, and work, all of you out there that are the new generations of the scholars and thinkers in the field, think of yourselves as the next generation of elders. Become good elders. Take care of your discursive territories. Take care of this tradition. Bring it into the world. Don't let the transhumanists and the Elon Musks impoverish it or declare it redundant or simply delete it. Remember my saying, they can only delay us, they can never delete us, because we are in some ways inexhaustible in our desire for social justice and for transformation. So all of that is a mixture of things, and the intergenerational factor is very, very important, because this is the last book of the trilogy, and I look upon it as my last academic book, as I have now officially retired from Utrecht University, and I think I will go on to do different things and write differently. So I wanted it very much as a sort of a farewell to academia as well, and giving you the best that I have, the most of the knowledge, the most of my ideas and visions. I really could not do more than this, or give you more of my knowledge. I hope it is enough to inspire you to go on and to make the difference that we need. And I think the fact that the book ends, spoiler, with feminism in outer space, with intergalactic equal opportunities, I think is both funny, facetious, and slightly tragic, considering the times that we are going through. So again, a mixture of a kind of a sober acknowledgement of the gravitas of our times and the determination to construct together social horizons of hopes through affirmative ethics. And I really would like that to be, in some ways, my theoretical legacy. I stop here because otherwise I talk too much.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rosie. Great to have your insights on the book, having written it and thought about it since it came out as well, and seeing some of the feedback too. So we do have a few questions that have been coming in, and you spoke about out of space and Elon Musk, so I actually wanted to start with this one. So the person says, I read the book already and loved it. So great start. They said, I have a question about the end where you focus on space. My question is, what can posthuman feminists do to avoid the masculinist and colonial pathway that we are on when it comes to space? And what advice do you have? So
well,
we'll start with that.
Dear Dr. Jones, considering the research that you do, that you should also answer some of this, what the law is coming up with in this. Now, this business of feminism in outer space is hilarious, at the same time quite tragic. A couple of things. I remember I am of the generation that has all the bad jokes, but one of the jokes that we had after we landed on the moon was, if you can put one man on the moon, why not all of them? The problem is they are going. Elon Musk is organizing that. They're landing, organizing the moon as a pied-à-terre to get on to Mars. So beware of your jokes. They may become truer than you think. It is the expansion of the extraction economy in other outer spaces. And really, Emily, you've written eminently on this, so I defer to your higher knowledge on this. What is happening in terms of feminism is quite an eye-opener. One of the things that are happening, and I do talk about this in the book, is the equal opportunity programs of NASA and the European Space Agency that is reserving special positions for astronauts out of the different groups of diversity. I think there are something like 16, I can't remember, a number of positions at the European Space Agency, led by the Italian Samantha Cristoforetti, who is the iconic astronaut, queer, gay, sort of feminist of the day. And she's saying to everybody, come on, get on board, let's go. And we can have a sort of a feminist, queer outer space. We don't have to be within the heteronormative paradigm for the future. So that's one way. It's very interesting. We have the extraction economy, so the Eurocentric model continuing, and the emancipation project continuing. So it's, what year are we in? Is this 1789? Is it 2022? It's quite an interesting one. But of course, to be more grounded, all of what this abstraction, this flight into other planets is doing is making the earthlings aware that we are the earthlings. And earthlings is a concept that is coming up very, very strongly. The ones who want to stay behind and take care of the planet. We are cleaning up the mess, you may say, and what a mess by the minute, as more wars and more epidemics deplete what is already a very impoverished planet. The earthlings may stay behind, be good elders, and then we start a whole discussion again on ecofeminism and becoming indigenous in taking care of the territory. But we're running out of time, and I think it's urgent to get activated. And whether we go earthlings or whether we go outer space, get active and take hold of the territory and do not give in to the gloom and doom of the times. This is a time to get active and get working.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rosie. A lot there for our audience to take away. And I can see we have a lot of questions coming in, so it's going to be a bit hard for me to select them, but I'm going to do my absolute best to select a variety. So we have one question that has come in that is asking a little bit about abolitionism in particular. So this comes in from Hannah Cirilla and asks about, notes that people such as Angela Davis and other contributing authors recently published a book called Abolition Feminism Now, which outlines kind of some of the abolition feminist politics. And the question is just really asking, how do you see abolition in line with post-human feminism? What do you see as being some potential links there, or do you?
Good one, complex, and I'm very careful as usual with the politics of location to speak from very embodied and embedded locations. I think what is happening at the moment is that we have a variety of positions coexisting, a great desire to rematerialize feminism in the midst of the really schizoid speeds of capitalism that Matthew also described so adequately and so well. As everything fragments and falls apart, holding it together, rematerializing it is really, really important. And that takes a number of positions, going from, shall we say, radical veganism to abolishing the human, thinking Patricia McCormack, to embracing our animality to various degrees, to breaking away, of course, from all the dualisms that construct us, the gender binaries, the nature culture binary, the human non-human binaries. But there are different degrees of this. It goes from the most extreme transformational type of queer trans feminism to a very shy, timid, can you please leave me in my own body type of feminism. And I think where you see this very strongly is in disability studies and the struggle against ableism, where you get people say, transform me, make me, pump me, make me into the cyborg. And others saying, can you just leave me as I am? I'm doing perfectly fine. And I think we have to accept that at this particular moment, there is this range of possible positions that we are all responding to the best of our affectivity, of our existential temperature, of our knowledge, of our moral courage, to the incredible speeds of deterritorialization of cognitive capitalism. So what I would plead for is, can we have a range of possible positions and live with them instead of fighting each other over this is right, this is wrong, we should. Could we not have a real politics of heterogeneous alliances where we accept that we're all responding in terms of locations and different capabilities to the enormous dematerializing forces of the system that we're in. You have to accept that for some people, even young as just my generation, the impact of technology is terrifying. And if you see what technology does in wars and what happens to bodies in wars, those bodies also require care. So that would be a bit my line, trying to create sort of a range of diverse positions and knowing that the transformative pull is pushing us, of course, in a totally new directions, and the landscape of which, the horizon of which is not at all clear at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rosie. And as ever, you kind of preempting some of the questions, which makes my job, when there are so many questions coming in, quite a challenge. But I quite liked this one that I saw came in, which, where I can now find it. So it comes in from Anna Hollick, says, "Dear Rosie, the book is really well structured with great summaries, and I have the feeling that it's a toolbox to really get active. But I quite like this question because she asked, which chapter is the most important for you? And I would like to add, which chapter is your favorite and why in that sense?"
Good Lord, it's very difficult. Very difficult. You know that I would not even know. I think I loved the footnotes. I loved the amount of knowledge that I was able to put into this. I really think that this is my PhD at the age of 60 plus. I really packed in everything that I could. But I tell you what, recently a reader said to me that the way to read this book is by making a playlist through the music. I go back to something that Matthew also brought out. And I think my favorite way of reading the book is, follow the music through it, from Beyonce to Gaga to Anderson to Bowie. There's a soundtrack in the book that I disseminated across, because also I wanted to keep it a little bit lighter, considering how ponderous and boring it gets as you make endless summaries, because you want the traditions to stay alive. And I think maybe it is that rhythm that is built into the gravitas of the knowledge that is my favorite aspect of it. But I see that Matthew has the hand up, and he's the
Yeah, and to follow on I think the footnotes is the best chapter. Is a great answer, as someone's mentioned in the chat already. But to follow on that kind of analysis of the paratext, I wonder if you could say a little about the cover, the image by Linda Dement from Cyberflesh Girl Monster, because I think it's an important point of reference that maybe would be worth talking about a little in this context.
Thank you so much. I just love that cover. I loved what Polity did with it, but I'm so grateful to Linda Dement and the Venus Matrix, and again, the Sydney Connection for allowing me to reprint it. Cyberfeminism really is another one of those genealogical moments that we need to bring back, and it is very much a UK and an Australian phenomenon. It's a working class anarchical phenomenon. It's in some ways there's something, a touch of not of despair, but of extreme sort of anxiety about it. And I think one of my favorite parts of the book is my letter to Kathy Acker, that I had to reduce greatly. It was 10 pages. The first version was 10 pages about why I love Kathy Acker, and then I reduced it. But it made me reflect back on that moment when it became clear that the great hopes of the 70s, were actually not going to change the world. When Thatcher came to power, when it seemed like the Cold War would be endless. We were right, it is endless, it has just come back again. There was a kind of a closing of the horizon, a moment of great despair, but also of incredible resistance to what was already becoming obvious as the ravages of neoliberalism. And I think that's a point of origin that somehow got lost in translation somehow. And I wanted to bring it back in this gritty post-industrial determination not to give in, and I think that it is that gritty determination that I think, and it's completely unsentimental and yet in your face provocative, which is exactly the image that Linda allowed me to use. It's a mixture. It's provoking. It's evocative. It's female but not quite. You don't know what you're looking at. And it's like, see if I care, I'm out of here type of mode. So that's a bit what I would have to say on that. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, really good to hear a little bit more about the cover as well. I have a kind of group of lots of questions that are asking similar things. So I'm going to try and sort of put them into a big question. So broadly looking at kind of thinking about decoloniality and sort of positionality in that sense. So the questions are kind of asking, well, some are asking about, well, you speak about intersectionality, and I'm wondering how we can acknowledge the shared mistreatment of certain populations under humanism while avoiding bonding only through oppression. And then other people are kind of asking how we can kind of push forward for an intersectional and post-colonial feminist agenda within a deeply colonial university system. So kind of hopefully you can see the links between those. There's about 10 questions that are coming on that, and I've tried to abbreviate them.
This is huge discussion. My key term for intersectionality has always been complexity and transversality. It's the ways I refer to the same idea. The nomadic moment is already a very intersectional moment. Nomadism is a critique of Eurocentrism from the center. It's the center critiquing the center. The intervention has been constant in my work to reach out of this assumption that the task of thinking, the job of critical theory pertains to certain species, classes, ethnicities, genders. It's as if it is kind of the prerogative of a caste, really. And this has been through my life, my love-hate relationship with philosophy. It's a discipline that I love. It's an archive that I love. I love those books. I know that people think they're boring. I can just spend my life with some of those dry, incredibly intricate analysis of how are we going to be able to think correctly about what is happening to us. I know we all have our pathology, this is mine, but they are distressingly reductive about what they define as the subject of this knowledge. When I was trained by Jenny Lloyd, who wrote The Man of Reason in Australia, where the awareness of the indigenous colonial issue was always very much in our face. And then I was retrained in Paris by Foucault, who said, now the age of European man is over. We're in a different moment of our history. So how do we, the subject, who are never fully part of the history, deal with the constant collapses of history? We become subject as subjectivity collapses. We get the voters, elections don't matter anymore. We become active in economy as the whole economy shifts to outer space and different modes of production. Is there something about the eternal delay of the oppressed that makes our struggle for justice, for equality, almost intrinsically kind of flawed? And how do we then posit a transformative leap forward that would not just be the mere repetition of the obvious? And this is why this, Stacey was so right, looking for the transformative element. How do you jump just ahead and actually set the agenda, as opposed to repairing the ravages and the disasters of what history and domination and potestas has done to us all? So I think that struggle remains the issue more than ever today. We've seen with the pandemic what injustices we're confronted with, how the biopolitical is a necropolitical management of who we are allowing to die. We see this with the invasion of the Ukraine, as we did in Syria. Who is allowed to simply die? These are figures that don't interest me, as Cheney said infamously in a different context. So I think my message to all of you that have this desire, this aspiration, is hold on to it, apply it, position somewhere specific, and out of your politics of location, construct the questions and the issues. More than ever, we earthlings need to continue this. And I hope that the paratext and the enormous apparatus of knowledge that I put in that book can give you some of my mappings, and then maybe inspire you to do your own, from your own memory. A memory is a collection of things that you forgot to forget, of events that didn't even happen to you personally, but they are part of your psychic and intellectual landscape. Hold on to them, operate them, find your people and work with them together. Don't give up and don't get down just because the times look hopeless. We work together to make them possibly more generative and more generous for us all, but we can only do it together.
Thank you, Rosie. I think that's a really important message for all of us. And it leads on quite nicely to, I'm going to group another bunch of questions because we have literally hundreds coming in, but it's really thinking about different generations and asking for advice about how you think different generations can work together to make change happen, and how you can reflect on your position now as a much more senior scholar and helping kind of younger generations in doing that, and vice versa. How can the kind of younger generations also work with you?
You know, generations is one of those issues that certainly my generation has not looked at enough. The baby boomers, we grew up saying, don't trust anybody above the age of 30. And then we turned 30 and we started shifting that age. And now that we're 60 plus, I'm not sure that we are any less kind of boisterous about our sense of collectivity. I think my generation, we were demographically very many. So we are used to be very, very many. And if you look at even at the number of feminist scholars in my generation, there's really quite a lot of us. And then, of course, it thins out as the demographics sort of changes. I am not sure that intergenerational dialogues are always the easiest, but the university is all about that. Research is all about that. If you teach feminist theories, history of feminist ideas, you're in the middle of this discussion. Who do you acknowledge as the elders? And I've always said in everything I've taught, be a good scholar. acknowledge everything that there is, and do not be sectarian, do not be tribal, acknowledge the sources, and then of course you work on the ones that you prefer, but do not believe anybody that says that they are at the origin of themselves. Everything is already a re-elaboration, and Matthew is so right, a reworking of things that were said, intuitions that were shared. We're really all part of a collective heterogeneous narrative. I think where the issue of intergenerational relations becomes crucial is now in terms of survival and in terms of the great challenges of today, and the aging process that I experience as a very enriching and challenging perspective, and it will be the next project I'm going to do, but not as elaborate as the Posthuman. The whole aging process has enormous implications: economic, fiscal, the debt, the question of money, the question of inheritances. This is a new situation that we're in, whereby the younger generation cannot expect to be better off than their parents or their grandparents. We were raised in the assumption that things will get better because we're part of a narrative of Western progress. And now how we deal with this in the context of an enormous geopolitical change and economic change is a huge issue. There's a lot of people working on it, thinking of Melinda Cooper working on inheritance as an economic factor. And you know how I and my beloved partner, Anna Kosmelik, have solved the issue for ourselves. We have created a foundation to which we give all of our money, and the foundation is run by Utrecht University, and we devote our money to scholarships for women, students and researchers for the future. It's a gesture that we thought was a single individual way of solving what is an unsolvable issue of these massive generational changes due to really seismic changes in history and economics that we could not have predicted. And as a tenured radicals, as a resident feminist professor, I've actually ended up doing really well, although this is not what I had ever set out to be. So as a way of harmonizing the intergenerational relations, Anna and I have made this decision, and we feel very peaceful with it. We feel it's one way of dealing with it. And maybe if an entire generation did that, maybe the issue of the debt of the young ones would look different. But it is only a drop in an ocean. I hope that my message is clear: relational, effective, affirmative, and confronting the differences, accepting the partial locations, and working together to make it sustainable for us all within the limits of our own shared aspiration and shared affects.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rosie. We're getting quite a few questions coming through that I noticed asking about the recording. So I just wanted to answer that very quickly so that people know this is being recorded. I'm not sure where it's going to go because Polity are in charge of that, but we'll make sure we advertise it widely. So I'm aware that it's getting a bit kind of late and I don't want to tire you out too much, but we had this question that came in, which I thought was quite a nice one to think about. So this came in via the chat, and it's a speculative question. And the questioner asks, what's coming after academic retirement for you, Rosie? What can we expect? Activism, art, or both at the same time?
How amazing. Well, I am already working in a different place in a big architecture and urban planning institute where we're trying to look at practical ways to create the green economy in a city, Rotterdam. How do we make real changes happen at the level of real people? We can talk about the earthlings, but how do we make Rotterdam is our only industrial city in the Netherlands, really, with an enormous post-industrial population, lots of migrants, and also lots of populists, white, disenfranchised, and white, very angry. So the reality principle is calling me out, and I find that very energizing and very sobering. sobering. I still want to write about the aging process. I think it's important that I should document that. My generation should document the aging. Nina Licke has a new beautiful book out in my series at Bloomsbury called Vibrant Death. I think we need to map that so that when it is your turn, you will have a feminist kind of LBGT account of the riches of the age, as well as the challenges of aging. And then I just hope that I can slowly learn to do less and to take care of the friends I have across the world. And I still have my family in Australia. I hope to sort of wind down and learn to travel light, to get ready for, well, the last years of my life, hopefully, still many years to go. But for me, the prospect, it's a philosophical process, of course, getting ready to die properly as an ethical project. And I find that very, both Annika and I talk a lot about it, and on how to age feministically, LBGT-ishly, how to do it affirmatively, but acknowledging the differences. It does make a huge difference to be 60 plus in all sorts of ways. And it makes the relationship with the younger generation richer, more necessary, more complex, but other. And I think I want to explore that otherness as a resource, as something that is positive. But who knows? And if it goes on like this, we will be doing serious militant activist work the way things are going. But thank you. And if any thoughts or ideas on how to age wisely, I would be very happy to receive them.
Thank you very much, Rosie. I mean, we have so much love for you, for the book, coming through for the Q&A and on the chat. And yeah, like I said, I can't possibly ask all of the questions. So I'm really sorry not to get through all of them. But I'll make sure that I do send the chat, the record of it and the questions to Rosie so that she can look through them at her leisure, and also so that she has a record of them, because I think there's a lot of really lovely messages there. I
would love to have that. If Polity could, I would love to read.
I could do it. Yeah, that's fine. I'll make sure that it happens. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, I think that at this stage though, we should probably wrap up, just because, you know, I think we could keep asking you questions all night and everybody would be really happy, but I think you would get quite tired. So I just want to thank you all for being here to join the discussion and to celebrate Rosie's fantastic achievement in publishing this book. Thank you to our panelists, of course, for their really brilliant contributions as well. And thank you most of all to Rosie for her, you know, decades of contribution to feminism and to posthumanism, and for just being so wonderful and so inspiring to so many of us. I think we could all raise a glass of virtual Prosecco or any other kind of drink that you fancy. So to Rosie.
Yeah, Emily, may I also thank you for amazing sharing. Many messages are picking it up. Incredibly generous, to the point, keeping time, but always so charmingly. Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you taking care of this.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a good day, evening, sleep if you're in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you for staying up. Thank you, everybody. Keep well. Thank you.